Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The bumper sticker on the car in front of me read, I owe, so off to work I go. That sentiment, I believe, is plastered on the bumpers of a lot of cars stuck on the Monday morning traffic on Interstate 85. It's not what's on the bumper sticker, is certainly on the minds of a lot of people. According to a 2016 survey by Forbes, the satisfaction rate among American workers is at 49.6%. Slightly over half of all workers that were surveyed are dissatisfied. And it's interesting, that's the highest it has been, the satisfaction rate, since 2005. The article said, for many, work is a drudgery one must endure rather than a vocation one can embrace. So what's the beef? Why are there so many unhappy employees? It has to do with a number of factors, it would seem. Again, according to the Forbes survey, look at the person in the cubicle next to you, a recent college graduate. They are making just about the same amount of money as you, a 10-year veteran of the company, is making. That's one beef. But workers go on to say it has to do with management, that they are not taken seriously, that they are simply replaceable parts in an ongoing large machine. The value that they have for one another seems to be missing. Management is not concerned about what one thinks, how one feels, what one knows, or how innovative one seems to be capable of. That you hear most often as workers gather in their local watering hole, speak over their beer, those wonderful words, it's just not fair. And it starts even before they get to a job. I was in the tea room. That's the hangout for students at Burnell. A group of girls at a table. One came in and slammed her books down, and what she said was, in a loud voice, it's just not fair. And that's the cleaned up version. She had gotten a C on a test. And her explanation was that it was the professor's fault because he did not cover the material adequately for her to understand it, so that she could give it back on the test. It's just not fair. It's not fair with workers. It's not fair with students. You hear kids, even as early as kindergarten, say of something that takes place, it's not fair. It's almost like having it built into our DNA. For the past few weeks, our gospel lessons from Matthew have been dealing with life in the community of faith, life in the church, if you will. Specifically, Jesus has told his disciples that they are to live in community. Live in community. And he said it is inevitable in community that there will be dissatisfaction and there will be discontent. Somebody is going to get their feelings hurt, or there will be some other dispute. And we heard last week how he said it was to be handled. The offended one is to go to the person who had offended them, confront them, and try to seek a resolution to whatever the conflict is. If that doesn't work, then get one or two other folks and go and try the same process again. And if that fails, then bring it to the attention of the whole congregation. I've never seen that happen. I have seen congregations where people have left. I have seen congregations where they are split. I have seen congregations go from being very large to empty churches, or a handful. Very little in the resolution process as Jesus has laid it out. Because usually that process is not followed. If you are the offended one, go and confront the person you have a disagreement with and try to seek a resolution. The end result may be that someone has to leave. It's not said, but it's implied in that gospel lesson that that's life. That's life. Peter comes to Jesus and says, if this happens, how many times must you go to the person? How many times must I forgive? 7 times? And Jesus says, 70 times 7, Peter. And I'll bet you 10 to 1 if he didn't say it, he thought it. That's just not fair. Not long after the discussion between Jesus and Peter, a wealthy young man comes to Jesus and asks what he needs to do to become a part of this process, a part of this entourage that has formed itself around Jesus. He's well-dressed, well-spoken, obviously has money. And Jesus says, sell what you have and come and join us. And it's recorded that he was saddened because he couldn't do that, or wouldn't do that. And it's then that I'm sure as he walked away saying, give away my money? That's just not fair. Just not fair. It's then that Peter says to Jesus, we've given up everything. We've left our jobs, we've left our families, we've been on the road with you now for months. What do we get out of all this? What do we get out of this? And it's then that Jesus tells that parable we heard this morning, the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. When grapes ripen, I am told, they must be harvested very quickly because they will deteriorate in the heat of the day. So it's imperative to get them harvested as soon as they have ripened. The owner of the plantation sends his foreman into town. 6 a.m. at the labor pool. He recruits the ones who are there and agrees to pay them what was the average daily wage, 1 denarius. The work goes slow. It's going to be a large harvest. The foreman returns at 9, at 12, and at 3. each time recruiting whoever is around, saying to them, I'll pay you what's fair. I'll pay you what's fair. Even goes back at 5 p.m. Anybody left in the labor pool at 5 o'clock is probably not worth having, but he takes them anyway. At the end of the day, the owner tells the foreman to pay him. He has them all line up, and beginning with the last hired, those at 5 p.m., he hands them the pay envelope containing 1 denarius. You can see the line stretching as the word passes, gets down to those folks who were hired at 6 a.m. and they're nudging each other and laughing and saying, I'll meet you at the bar, because they know they're going to get paid a lot more. And they get 1 denarius. And the collective cry is, it's just not fair. And the owner comes out and addresses them. He says to them, friends, I do you no wrong. I paid you what I promised. Do you begrudge me my generosity? Can't I do with what is mine as I choose? Do you begrudge my generosity? Can I do with mine what I choose? I choose to be generous. Now, let me say, first of all, this is a parable not about fairness. It's not about fairness, and it's not about employer-employee relationships. If it were, it occurred to me that the next day they would all be filing protest. A bunch of disgruntled workers and everybody from the labor union to the AFL-CIO to management would be raising hell in court. Because that's what we do when we think we've been treated unfairly. And it's not about that. Jesus goes on in this parable to describe what the owner is like. It says that the owner is generous. And what I would encourage you, take this home with you, this leaflet, read it again. Three things I would point out. First of all, the owner of the vineyard does not call them sorry laborers, scum of the earth, latecomers. He addresses them friends. And in the original language, it is a term of endearment. Friends, I wish you no harm. I call you friends. It is that image that I think Jesus seeks to give to those who hear him, to convey in this story. That the owner of the vineyard, and I'm sure you can figure out who that is, calls them friends. There is a mid-19th century hymn that's worth going back and reading. What a friend we have in Jesus. He calls those who hear this friends. I choose to be generous. The owner of the vineyard chooses to be generous rather than a labor manager, rather than balancing the scales evenly. I choose to be generous. Do you begrudge me that I choose to be generous with what I have? It's not about fairness, it's about generosity. Those of us who have that invisible tattoo on our forehead, that tattoo of a cross, are the ones who are named in our baptism, and we are the friends. And the promise is not fairness. Nowhere in the gospel does Jesus promise he or God to be fair to us. Generous, forgiving, loving. Not a single word about fairness. Friend, I call you by name. Remember where you got your name? When that clergy person took you maybe as a child or maybe as an adult. Poured water on you, made the sign of the cross on your forehead, and asked someone, name this person. I call you by name. I call you friend. It seems to me that there is some great comfort if you read it from that standpoint and not from the standpoint of what is fair in life. I will treat you fairly. I will be generous to you. In lots of places in our life, we cry for fairness, and it's a legitimate cry. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm at that age and at that place in life where the last thing I want from God is fairness. But I'll take all the generosity I can get.